It's time for the annual tradition of Ohio State's defensive line has a field day with Penn State. We think. The last couple of weeks have not necessarily suggested that, but that's been the history, right? Going back to Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young in 2018 and 2019. You saw Tommy Togiai have 3 sacks in 2020. JT Tuimoloau, the last time they went to Penn State, had maybe one of the 5 greatest individual performances we've ever seen in college football history. But the problem is, this year we haven't even seen anything close to suggesting that that's even on the horizon, even though you've got Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, 2 5-star senior guys who are trying to be first-round draft picks. Tyleik Williams, a potential All-American candidate from last year, and Ty Hamilton. They don't play a lot of depth there. They don't rotate a lot, and that was talked about a lot as well. But it's those 4 guys. Stefan, what's your faith that you actually see a performance like that, given the history that Ohio State has with Penn State with its defensive line, but also mix that with the last time Ohio State got on the field with a top 5 opponent? It's not like we saw the defensive line creating havoc.
Yeah, it feels like 2 strong forces about to butt heads, right? Ohio State's history against Penn State and kind of what we've seen from them. It's kind of felt like 2 polar opposites. So much of this group is based on kind of the potential that we've seen with them, right? Like guys like JT and Jack and the games that they've had at times in their career where you're like, that's what we've been talking about. Like that performance is what we've been talking about. And oftentimes to win a game like this, to win a 4-quarter game on the road against a top 5 opponent, you need someone to have that type of game. It doesn't have to be historical like JT had a few years ago, but it needs to be something where Penn State on every play is thinking, how are we going to slow down Jack Sawyer? How are we going to slow down JT? Like that's something that has to be, whoever quarterback is for Penn State, that has to be on his mind, is constantly thinking either from this side or this side, what's going to happen on any given play. And we haven't seen that yet this year. And Penn State has a guy like that who's done it multiple times this season on their defensive line. Can Jack or JT or someone else on the defensive line have that performance, have that breakout performance? Early in the year, against some of the non-conference opponents, Ryan Day talked about it felt like Jack and JT were constantly creating pressure, even if they necessarily weren't getting sacks. I think you're going to need to get a few sacks this game. I think you need to hit the quarterback in order to be effective against this Penn State offense. Will you get some help from linebackers? Probably, because we saw them blitz a bit more against Nebraska, and maybe that's something that they're trying to do more, after struggles in that department against Oregon. But even then, I still think one of those 2 guys, Jack or JT, has to have that game, the game this season, to really give you a chance against Penn State.
Andrew, what's your confidence level that you actually see that on Saturday based off what we've seen through the first 7 games?
1 being nothing, 10 being they'll turn it on like they always do for Penn State.
10 being the JT Tuimoloau game.
10 being the JT Tuimoloau game. I'm probably like a 4.
You've been at a 4 a lot. Go listen to the last podcast we did. Yeah. Andrew's just been living at a 4 with Ohio State lately.
Ohio State's defense has been living at a 4. I look at this defense, and Jim Knowles 45 minutes ago, talked about blitzing and how that was an emphasis against Nebraska because they felt they had to do that to get pressure. Ding, 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 ding. That set an alarm off in my head where Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, is saying, we have 4 NFL draft picks on our defensive line. 2 of them are 5 stars in their 4th year in the program. Tyleik Williams might be a first-round pick in a couple of months. Ty Hamilton, people talk about him as a great run stuffer and a great nose tackle. I thought he played pretty well against Nebraska. And you are sitting in a position to where you are saying, we have to blitz to get home. That's not a good spot to be. And that, to me, signals that they are worried about where this defensive line is at. So I'm worried because they're worried, if that makes sense. I'm concerned because they are concerned. If Jim Knowles got out there today and said, and perhaps maybe if Jim Knowles got out there and said, hey guys, we're just going to stick with our 4-man rush, perhaps we'd be standing here going, Jim Knowles is a moron. What is he doing? You need to change things, obviously. Of course we could be doing that. But they're obviously looking for something to fix this defensive line and fix this pass rush and get after the quarterback more. So I have questions. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm not saying Jack Sawyer can't have a great game against Penn State or JT can't have a great game against Penn State or Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton can't just force nothing from Penn State's run game. Of course, Ohio State's defensive line can have a great game. But I have questions. And I'm not feeling great about this defensive line going into State College, because you look at where this team is at and what they've done these last couple of weeks. I mean, they generated some pressures against Nebraska. That was by blitzing a lot and sending the house. And you had a freshman quarterback who maybe couldn't make you pay in some of those situations. And for some godforsaken reason, Nebraska decided that they were just going to run a million screens, and that none of them worked. So you're going to face a better offense. You're going to face a better team in Penn State. You're going to play in a tougher environment. And we just saw it happen 3 weeks ago, that Ohio State's defensive line couldn't get pressure. I'm pretty concerned about Ohio State's defensive line getting pressure against Penn State.
I think you can afford to blitz against Penn State more so than Oregon, though, because Penn State doesn't have the receivers that Oregon does, right? Like, you feel a bit more comfortable. I know they haven't played the best recently, but with Davison and Denzel, I think you've got a bit more confidence in their ability to cover if left on an island than you maybe did against Oregon.
I think they should play Jermaine Matthews more. But that's a different conversation. To the point you made about the tackles for loss, I think like 8 of their TFLs came because Nebraska ran a screen and Ohio State said, come on in. You're going to get tackled behind the line of scrimmage.
The tackles for loss were not in the way that you would read them. Like, if you read all those tackles for losses, they are not somebody shoots a gap and tackles the running back 3 yards in the backfield. They were not in the way that you would expect them.
Ohio State wasn't living in the backfield of Nebraska. Nebraska was living in the backfield of Nebraska.
Exactly.
Their 3 sacks.
Big Ten.
They sent pressure on all 3 of them. They sent Cody Simon on blitzes. They sent Sonny Styles on blitzes. They even sent Caleb Downs on a blitz, and that's how they got home. In fact, on JT Tuimoloau sack, that's what happened. The whole offensive line slid left. JT was free, and he grabbed Dylan Raiola with one hand and said, come sit down, freshman. It was a cool-looking sack, but it's not like he beat anybody to get the sack. I asked Jim Knowles flat out about his confidence level and their ability to get pressure with 4, and he said, it's always a work in progress, which is coach speak. But also, you have 3 seniors and a 5th-year senior as your starters who have played an abundance of snaps. Why is it still a work in progress? It should be a finished product. When we talked about all these guys coming back in the last winter, we were talking about them like that because they were finished products who put off the NFL to come do this again. And you're telling me it's a work in progress 7 games into their 4th year or their 5th year here, and it's a work in progress. You just said that Ty Hamilton had his best game. You're right. But also on his sack, nobody blocked him because they were worried about the blitzers. I'm being overly critical. I've been very, very negative this week. But it's kind of warranted the way they've played here. So I am kind of worried about maybe that trend comes to an end. But I'm also worried, and go check out the offensive line video, that role might get switched, and Abdul Carter's the defensive lineman who has a field day with an offensive line. And that's not going to be a good thing for Ohio State either, but at least Ohio State's got some weapons offensively who I think can maybe mitigate that, maybe by just getting the ball out quickly. But this defensive line, it's not living up to advertisement right now. And maybe that gets unlocked against Penn State because this is the game where just things kind of fall into place for Ohio State's defensive line over the last decade since Larry Johnson's here, and maybe it sparks something for the second half of the season. But we've reached a point here where everybody who's a starter there has lost their hypothetical, has lost their, man, what can they be? Because they're on the back half of their last season as Ohio State players, and we're still calling it a work in progress. That's not good. That's not good. That's not good. That's not good. So I think I'm with Andrew. I made fun of him for being at a 4. That's because I'm at like a 3.5. To be frank about it. We'll continue to have this conversation on Buckeye Talk, so go find that wherever you find podcasts. Get the text 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that for Stefan and for Andrew. And for Mr. 3.5, talk to you later.